race fans watching around the world, welcome back to the channel. I am Jake Sanderson, this is Snowman Cycling, and this week we've got another race recap video for you as I return on the road to fitness back from scratch. And unfortunately for me, this time around I've made not one but two fatal mistakes as I've signed up to a race where I have the worst 20-minute power, therefore according to Zwift Racing, I am the worst racer in the whole event. But not only that, I'm going up against a national champion as I line up against national Finnish Masters ESports champion Patrik Karlstrom, recently crowned winner just a couple of weeks ago. He's an absolutely insanely good rider, as we're about to find out. So let's jump into this one. You're going to see me get battered, brutalized, and am I going to get beaten? Well, let's find out as we jump into this week's episode. Okay, guys, so as we jump into this one, it's a little bit of a different format to the usual kind of races. This is a snow club championship race, so it's snow riders only. And there's a couple of different things going on here. The riders are split across 3 separate teams, so everyone has at least one teammate with them in this group, and that will give us some slightly different tactics. You'll be able to tell who is in the different teams by the different jerseys that they're wearing. And my partner for this one is Pete the Pressure Vale, and as you can see, we start this one out straight out of the pen. Me and Pete elect to push the pace and put the pressure quite literally on the other teams. And this is where our tactics are going to have to come into play, because Pete and me are pretty much the opposite kinds of rider. Pete is a fantastic TT and slow twitch rider. He really can do 4.3, 4.4 watts per kilo for as long as he likes. A really strong A rider with fantastic climbing ability, but I'm sure he'd be the first to say he does not have the punch and the sprint to contest with the bunch finish of races. Whereas I am a fabulous fast twitch featherweight, and quite literally all I can do is put in 1 or 2 good sprint efforts towards the end. So that means we're going to have to dovetail really effectively, and we were supposed to have another C category race going on at the same time. It was supposed to be visible to us, that set off 2 minutes earlier than the Bs and the As did, but unfortunately we couldn't see them, so we were just getting radio comms as to sort of where they were, and each team had at least one C rider in that group also. So we're not going to worry too much about the C riders in this one because we haven't got visibility of them. We're just going to worry about outscoring the opponents that we can see, and the points format for this one is very, very similar to a ladder race. So the winner takes 10 points, and then each place goes 1 point further down, and at the end of the day it's the team with the most points win. So this isn't an individual race, it's your combined points total. So me and Pete are going to be trying to beat the other teams. And as we can see here, that makes for some really interesting, and when I say interesting, I mean painful tactical decisions we're going to have to make. So when people like Patrik and his 4.9 watt per kilo 20-minute power attack off the front, we've got no choice but for one of our teammates to try and be up there. And unfortunately for me, as the rider with the punch, I'm the one that has to close it. And as you can see though, everybody's playing games, everybody's being very tactical, and the group just comes back together. Nobody's going to let anybody get away, but they're not going to do any more work than they have to. Now ideally for me and Pete would get away on the front of this group and just do his 20-minute TT to the finish, but I don't think it's going to be that simple. We'll see if we can get any opportunities to get him away, but when we hit inclines like this on the Breakaway Brae at the end of the lead-in, it's just going to be so punchy, so vicious and so fast that Pete's going to actually be in a world of hurt as Patrik lays on the pain and shows us why he is a national champion, puts that power down, gets a bit of a gap and forces everybody else to chase. And he's probably not going to get away here. He probably knows he's probably not going to get away here, but he's just putting the pain on as his teammate comes around alongside, and we get 2 riders go up off the front, Nilok and Tommy, 2 very, very strong riders, which means Patrik and his teammate Doug have got to close, and it's our teammate Pete that's at the back of this group really feeling that pressure, because as I said, it's just those short punchy inclines that he's going to suffer on. And as we can see there, the games stall, the tactics falter, and everybody comes back together. This one is going to be really, really difficult for anybody to get away, but spoiler alert, that doesn't mean people aren't going to try, and maybe somebody's going to get away with it. And at this point, I am really suffering. The surges in the race pace, all these attacks, having to close those gaps, are really sapping my legs. But most importantly, raising my heart rate. And honestly, I felt absolutely terrible at this point. If I didn't have a teammate like Pete relying on me to finish this race alongside our teammate Kev in the C group, I'm pretty sure that I would have just bailed out of this race. I felt really, really bad. Just did not have the energy to close many of these attacks, and that means, as we can see here, I'm having to be really, really efficient with my drafting. I said at the start I had the worst 20-minute power out of this group at this point, and it certainly feels that way. So I'm going to have to be really, really smart. And Pete is on the front of this group, putting the pressure down, as he likes to do, which is exactly what we need. So I'm going to force the other riders around me to close that gap. I don't care if Patrik is in front of me. If I'm with him, it's probably going to be okay. He's strong enough that he can close that gap and I can sit on his wheel. And if we get dropped, Well, that's fine by me, because really Patrik is going to win this race, and if he doesn't, that's a victory for us in itself. So I'm prepared, as I like to call it, to play chicken with the riders at the back of this group and say, I'm not going to close that gap, you can close that gap for us, or we're going to get dropped. And sometimes if you're the weakest rider, you have to be ruthless like that, because if I do all the work and close all those gaps for those riders and we get to the sprint finish, I'm not going to have anything left anyway. And as we've said many times on this channel, I like to gamble, and sometimes you have to use your leverage to apply that pressure and force everybody else to gamble with you. And sometimes people just don't like to do that. So as we can see here, a couple of these riders are forced to close that gap, and I just sit at the back, enjoy their draft, and let them drag me up to the front group. So I'm being really, really cheeky here. Some might call it cowardly, but I know that I'm doing the best thing that I can do to try and finish overall. And as I say, this is really good for Pete, because if Pete can get away, that gives him the best chance of finishing as high up as he can. But unfortunately, Patrik is just too strong. He's not going to let that happen. And as he catches the group here, he goes over the top and counters. And I think everybody here looked at each other and went, I haven't got the legs to close this. I haven't got the energy, I haven't got the power, and Patrik is just going to pull away on the front of this group, as we thought he may well be able to do. Frankly, I was hoping that that might mean that the pace in this group eased up as everybody just let Patrik ride off the front, but no, not to be. No dice, Grandma. As we hit the next incline, the riders are really going for it. And I am really clinging on for dear life here, using every tip, trick, tactic I can to sit at the back of that group and suck the draft and let these riders drag me along. But even that is really, really tricky, because they're just not going easy on any of these inclines. I don't think some of them have given up on catching Patrik just yet, as Tommy makes an attack off the front. And as you can see from the line, there's just not much draft, so you have to close those gaps when they open up, and if you're at the back of the group, no one else to close them for you. And at this point in the race, I'm having to think about the finale, what's likely to happen, and how I can score my team the most points that I possibly can. And looking at the rider makeup of this group, the 20-minute powers and the punches, I think a really good result would just not to finish last. And Doug, Tommy, and especially Nilok are really good racers with a real chance of getting the best placing from our group. And whilst it's highly unlikely that we'll be able to beat Patrik at this point, but if I can get anywhere near Nilok, I'm going to count that as a massive win, because he really does have the punch to get away from this group. Which means that realistically, my best bet here is going to be to watch the attacks and not let anybody get away from here. If we get to Breakaway Brae, which is where this race finishes, and I'm in this group, I've got a decent chance of placing well. But I have to be at the front of this race. So if anybody attacks, like on the rise that's just about to come up now, then I'm going to have to be really, really careful. And unfortunately for me, Nilok decides that he doesn't want to wait for the sprint finish, and he elects to attack really, really hard out the front of this group, and he gets a really big gap. And as you can see, Patrik's gap off the front is only about 7 seconds. And before we know it, Nilok has managed to bridge across, and he's closed the gap to Patrik just on that small little incline. So fantastic attack from Colin. Unfortunately for him, I was really aware that he was potentially going to do that, and I used my best wheel-sucking, draft-drinking impression to get onto his wheel. And as you can see there, he's using the Zwift Play controllers to steer across the road and try and kick me out of his draft. But unfortunately for him, I've got the Zwift Play controllers as well, so I elect to steer across the road and jump onto his wheel. So he did all of the work there. I didn't do any of the work. All I did was sit on his wheel and try and go with him. And he very nearly dropped me there. I was only just about able to get onto his wheel. And that means that somehow, with only 1.3 kilometers to go, we found ourselves back at the front of this race, and inexplicably in with a chance of getting the win. Well, on paper anyway, if we disregard Patrik's 16 watt per kilo 15-second sprint. And as you can spot, we've got one rider from each team in the front of this group, and I have to be really, really aware that Doug, Tommy and Pete are just a few seconds behind. So we're going to have to balance not doing too much work in the front group with getting caught from the group behind. So Colin's aware of that. We both know that Patrik is easily the strongest out of these riders. Nilok elects to let the wheel go as we hit the base of Breakaway Brae. And now we are really racing. This is what we've come here to see. The sprint finish finale. Patrik elects to not go too hard too early, but he's laying down a pace that is going to mean that we are really feeling it. And you just know that when we get to the top half of this Breakaway Brae, he's going to turn on the afterburners and probably leave us for dead. So me and Nilok are looking at each other and playing chicken here for our dear lives, trying our best to sort of get the other one to do the work. Nilok elects to close the gap here, and I'm playing a little bit of rope-a-dope to try and get him to do that work for me. And this is where we can really see Patrik's quality as he turns on the style and leaves us for dead. I am really, really hurting here. Nilok is really, really hurting here, and we are just going to stare each other down and see who blinks first. And this is the point with 170 meters to go where I know if I'm going to come around Nilok, I have to go now, and I just give it everything that I've got left. I managed to get a little bit of a gap on him, and using that effort that he put in earlier on, where I was managed to save a bit of energy and sit on his wheel, I've managed to pip him to the line there. So pretty much only managed that because, as I say, I sat on his wheel whilst he did the work to bridge up to Patrik, and also he'd done a really big race the day before as well. So I was punching above my weight there, as they say, and probably didn't deserve that one. Nilok deserved that one by doing the more work for sure, but that's racing for you. Sometimes the weaker racer will do what they need to pull out a result. And as we can see from the official results on Zwift Power, looking at the average power for the riders in the group, we can see that I easily did the least power. So I definitely was the weakest rider. I only did 3.5 watts per kilo average. Everyone else in our group did at least 3.8 watt per kilo average. My normalized power, as we can see, there was a lot higher than everybody else's. The differential there was actually about 4 watts per kilo average there, just over on the 20-minute power for me, which just shows you the power of drafting effectively and picking the moves to go with. Some might call that a cowardly way to race, but hey, I'm a competitive guy, and you do what you've got to do to get the best result. A fantastic result from Patrik there. Honestly, I'm not convinced he wasn't taking it easy on us. He did 4.9 watts per kilo to win that Masters race literally the week before. So I think he was just having a zone 2 recovery ride and enjoying the social aspect of it with us. But you really can see the quality there. There's a lot of fake riders that you see on Zwift Power racing, but it's quite easy to verify when somebody's real. They've got dual power recordings. They've got matching in real life performances on Strava, things like KOMs and ride speeds. Whereas Patrik had to do all of that verification alongside things like a weigh-in video. So you know for a fact that he's 100% legit. And believe me when I say Patrik is one of the strongest riders I've ever had the pleasure of riding with. We were really proud to see him win that Finnish National Masters Esports Championship representing the snow team, and he's had a really cool snow national championship jersey mocked up that we can see here. Let me know in the comments if you like that one. I'm extremely jealous. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed that one. We're back on the road to recovery. Hopefully we can see some more progress over the next few weeks. Thank you as always for watching. Make sure you like, comment, most importantly subscribe, and as always, race fast, ride hard, and remember that you are appreciated.